C386. Chapter 102 Athena_4. One up, one down, one positive, one negative, like two magnets attracting and repelling each other, floating up and sinking down. These two planes were far from stabilized, their powers still varied greatly, but compared to the beginning, the force needed to keep them stable was not as strong anymore. Standing in the chaotic void, with his left hand smoothing out the conflicts between planes, Laine gazed at the outside world, at the extraordinary phenomena between heaven and earth, and at the location of Olympus. There, a breath of air that transcended all other deities was gradually gathering. Yet for some reason, this aura felt different to Laine, not resembling the primordial gods, but involving something else. Perhaps it was the order of the present world, perhaps the reversal of fate, or maybe something else. In any case, this was not a simple ascension, nor did Laine believe Zeus could inexplicably advance further just by relying on his godhood. So, Liana, he called softly, and in the next moment, in the chaotic fifth layer of the spirit realm, the goddess of the nether moon appeared in her purple gown. She folded her wings behind her and bowed slightly to Laine. I am here, your highness. Keep an eye on this place for me, I need to step out for a bit, especially keep Icarus away. After giving the order, and seeing Liana's understanding nod, he temporarily handed over the work of maintaining the balance. The goddess of the nether moon's power was far from sufficient for such a task for a long duration, but Laine simply wanted her to hold on for a little while. He casually opened a portal in the void and stepped out. To find out the problem, he just needed to go there. He had been ready to check since he noticed the transfer of the scepter of wisdom, but he had been busy finishing up other matters. But now, it seemed better for him to go ahead and look. Zeus's growth in strength seemed unexpected, yet it was also within reason, since in the original mythical trajectory, he indeed became stronger and stronger until he eventually topped the world. Just like the mythology of later generations. Laine only knew Zeus once needed to craft divine artifacts, unite his brothers to defeat Cronus, and gradually developed into someone seemingly invincible, fearless even in the face of the goddess of the night. No one knew whether the changes of today were truly accidents or if they were destined under the influence of fate. Or perhaps it was a bit of both. After all, the destinies of the other deities were changed by Laine, which likely led to some of their powers being taken away early. Regardless, since he could not possibly run to the mortal realm to contend for the position of the divine king, it was very likely that Zeus would still embark on a similar path. Moreover, the mortal realm did not favor primordial gods, nor did it welcome those who wreaked havoc upon order, but the divine king. Laine was not quite sure, but it didn't matter. Since he didn't know how Zeus in the original trajectory truly used faith to break through great boundaries, Laine had always planned on the basis that Zeus could ascend to greatness. Now, he was more curious about what allowed the divine king to ascend and whether he could learn anything from it. Meanwhile, at the highest reaches of the sky, as Zeus's sovereignty grand ritual slowly started to function, imitating the rituals used to establish the first sovereignty and began absorbing the faith directed at Olympus and the divine king. However, even Zeus himself did not realize that his actions also brought another effect. Following a certain connection, a faint yet pure power soared, breaking through many barriers, converging towards the original divine king. This power was not abundant in quantity, as the ritual itself was not perfect, resulting in a not so clear affinity with the first divine king, but it was continuous. As long as Zeus's ritual went on for another day, the convergence would not stop. Once again, as this power blended into the sky, an immense and vague consciousness was slightly pulled back from eternal tranquility. It returned to its body once more, causing the heavens to shudder slightly at this moment. However, the birth of a new deity concealed all this, and the waves from the source sea and the tremors of the land made the changes in the sky seem insignificant, so nobody noticed any of it. Only Atlas, the bearer of the heavens, hesitated for a moment, then dismissed the thought. In silence, a certain ancient supreme being revived a little. Perhaps because that power was too weak, resulting in an equally minute consciousness, his now limited thinking capacity focused on a single obsession that continued to influence this ancient deity. Thus, under the drift of vague consciousness, the sky began to speak. Retrieve my body parts. Whoever it is, retrieve them, you will gain everything. The blurred murmurs came from the sky, but this world-shaking content was heard by no being. At this moment in the mortal realm, nobody remembered his existence anymore. So the empty voice echoed in the skies, day by day, ceaselessly. A ritual, a birth, the entire world trembled because of it. The advent of a new deity was just the beginning. it ignited many long-standing contradictions. However, at this moment in Olympus, no one was aware of all these changes. Inside the Great Hall, amidst the enveloping extraordinary phenomena, from the top of Zeus's head, a bright-eyed young girl leapt out. Her attire was like armor, yet also like a flowing dress. In her left hand, she held the shield of Aegis, that divine artifact transformed from the hide infected with the divine power of the previous goddess of wisdom, a witness to her and the divine king's love. In her right hand, she grasped a spear that symbolized ceasing wars and undefeated victories. C. 387. Chapter 102 Athena_5. As she descended gracefully in front of the gods, the call of the law also reached its climax, as the sky and earth called out her name, allowing the gods and mortals of the world to witness her arrival together. Pallas Athena, goddess of wisdom, the unbeatable sovereign. An indescribable atmosphere spread throughout the palace. Under the effect of restored power, Zeus's cleft skull had long since healed. At this moment, some deities looked at him with skeptical eyes while others displayed a mocking expression. Now everything was clear. 2 generations of the goddess of wisdom, born from the divine king's skull. As long as one wasn't too foolish, all the gods could guess the cause and effect. Just moments ago he had proclaimed his difference from the first 2 divine kings, and now he had become a laughingstock. Instantly, the hearts of those deities who had been somewhat moved by the position of the principal god were now filled with doubts. This 3rd generation divine king, although it seemed like he had been busy since his ascension, the outcomes hadn't been very impressive. The affair with the goddess and even the involvement with a mortal, these were things that most deities didn't care much about. At most, they would gossip about it after meals, but this act, akin to that of Cronus swallowing his children, was a different story altogether. Because the one standing beside the 3rd generation divine king, his staunchest supporter, was herself a victim of all these past deeds. Zeus, is this what you did to Métis? Can you really do such a thing? Have you already forgotten our past? With a stern reprimand, although hearts might waver, in the end, no one dared to confront the divine king directly, except for Hestia. Looking at Athena in the center of the great hall, she began to doubt for the first time whether her initial support for Zeus had been a mistake. She waited for Zeus's explanation. Although she didn't think he could come up with any reasonable justification, due to the rare familial affection among the chaotic gods, she still harbored hope. But in front of her, Zeus ignored her, merely rubbing the top of his head before slowly raising it. The past. Of course, I haven't forgotten. Hestia, how can I forget the feeling of having my fate controlled by others? He revealed a mocking smile, feeling the different gazes within the hall. Faced with his older sister's interrogation, Zeus showed no sign of shame or guilt. He simply looked towards the center of the hall, gazing at his dazzling daughter, witnessing the bright and heroic gleam in her eyes, and the divine king burst into laughter. Athena, my child, you have finally come into this world. Now, tell me in front of all the gods, whom do you fight for? Will you aim your spear at me? My spear and shield fight only for myself. With a vivid and powerful voice, Athena spoke her first words since coming into the world. She looked up at the divine king, who gave her life but also took everything from the one who had given her the other half of life. And prior to today, she hadn't even come into this world. Even for wisdom, it was difficult to make a more direct choice as a newly born goddess. So, she simply showed rejection to the divine king, without taking any further steps towards animosity. She needed some time. Her wisdom told her that any hasty decision would inevitably lead to the wrong outcome. Ha ha ha. Very good, that is enough. Athena, my child, stand aside in my honor for giving you life and witness everything with your own eyes today. The laughter eventually subsided. The next moment, Zeus rose from his throne. It seemed like Hestia wanted to say something, and the goddess of beauty, who had just been coerced into marriage, also took a step forward, but the divine king paid them no heed. Sensing the presence of kingship, Zeus no longer wished to make futile defenses. Indeed, his previous words were all excuses. When it came down to it, wasn't transferring of divine kingship all about fate and power? But now he had grasped the trajectory of destiny. Although there were many things he still couldn't see clearly, he understood the crux of the matter. The ritual of kingship might not allow him to transcend beyond the world, but what he sought was not transcendence. So this is chaos. You can be bad, but not weak. You can make everyone despise you, as long as you are unbeatable to the whole world. No one heard these words, as they were meant solely for the divine king himself. The earth trembled slightly, and Zeus knew that the continuous turmoil had finally awakened Gaia midway. He was unaware of the changes in the golden apple orchard, but even without considering that, the first person Mother Earth would seek upon awakening would probably be him. Unbeatable to the whole world. He certainly had not achieved that yet, but unbeatable by the Earth, that he was willing to try. Let this ancient God, who always made her presence felt every time the divine kings changed, understand. If you are an antiquated relic of an old era, then remain immersed in your past and do not come back. C. 388. Chapter 103. The mountain collapses. Deep into the night, all was quiet. Unlike the bustling Mount Olympus, once Apollo had left, the vast Delphic Great Plains returned to peace and tranquility. Compared to the outside world, even the chirping of insects didn't arise in this secluded place of Mother Earth, let alone the sounds of birds and beasts. Due to their animal instincts, none dared approach this lush and bountiful land, as if it were some dreadful forbidden territory. However, the silence was only temporary. When the anomaly of a divine birth enveloped the heavens and earth, Delphi could not remain an exception. Even the abode of the primordial gods couldn't shield against the sound stemming from the prime liquid and the law. So, when the true name of the new god resonated throughout the world, it pierced through the earth, unimpeded, resounding in the heart of some vast consciousness. This sudden sound made the long-slumbering consciousness ripple slightly. If one were prepared in advance, the phenomenon of godly birth would not awaken a slumbering deity. But clearly, due to the changes in the laws of heaven and earth at the turn of the era, all gods believed such a scene would not be witnessed again, so naturally, they did not prepare for it. Quote. 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 So noisy. Quote. Annoying sound. Pallas Athena. Who is that? Quote. Your next chapter is on MVL. This seems to be a godly birth. Why would there be divine birth in this era? What has happened outside, and how long have I slept? Consciousness gradually awoke, and as the anomaly concluded, the long-sleeping Mother Earth finally recovered some memories from the chaos of thoughts. She could feel that her state was far from fully restored. Not to mention the loss of origin caused by numerous splits, the residual rejection by the laws from the battles at the turn of the era still lingered. Although Gaia's sense of time synchronized with the Earth upon her return, with 100 years being but a brief moment, based on the outcome of her slumber, it clearly hadn't been long. 300 to 500 years, at most 700 to 800 years, Mother Earth wasn't very clear about the exact time, but at most that was how long it had been. Could it be that in such a short time, the laws and order of the present world had changed again? This was somewhat unexpected for Gaia, for in her memory, for the entire first millennium of the Second Age, Cronus had only just secured his position as the divine king. Legislation and the creation of humans, those were things that happened later. Quote. Well, now that I'm awake, let's go see what has happened. Speaking of which, I forgot to ask, after the Titans' war, how does Zeus plan to treat his elders? The strata gently trembled, the heavy voice echoing over the plain, and the next moment, under the convergence of vast consciousness, a tawny halo slowly flowed, surging towards the ground. At the foot of Mount Parnassus, in a courtyard that blended seamlessly with nature, strands of invisible air streams gathered above, gradually taking the shape of a woman. Brown robes dragged along the ground, and the figure's features became clearer. Perhaps because of the hundreds of years of slumber, although Gaia's deficit had not been replenished, her outward complexion had vastly improved. This was still due to the 9 realms' remnants not collapsing. Otherwise, her state could have been even better. If those tiny fragments were integrated into the present world or merged with the Earth, Gaia might really take this opportunity to greatly enhance her origin and recapture some of Mother Earth's past glory. However, reality had no ifs, and the slight wrinkles on her face that has rejuvenated quite a bit, proved that all these were merely superficial efforts. Slumber was for healing wounds, reducing the rejection of laws, and restoring depleted divine power, but it wasn't very useful for authority and symbols. So, where has the moon gone? The figure became fully solid, and Mother Earth looked up at the sky. The night sky was filled with stars, but the moon that should have been there was nowhere to be found. How ridiculous. Could it be that the third-generation divine court is so incompetent that they can't even ensure the movements of the sun and moon? I remember. That moon deity was only a weak divine power being. With a snort, Gaia pushed open the gate of the courtyard. The moon was a minor matter, not of great importance to her. She decided to first summon her maid to ask what had happened recently. Her gaze swept over the nearby area. Mother Earth searched for the life auras in the vicinity. However, to her confusion, the nymphs that should have been guarding nearby were nowhere to be found, and even across the whole Great Plain, there were only a few barely familiar auras. Something was not quite right, very different from before her slumber. Moanda, come see me. Calling softly, Gaia's voice traveled from outside the courtyard, echoing above the vast plain. However, as she had sensed, the nymph designated to guard the Delphi temple was missing, with no clue as to where she had gone. Quote. Has there been outsiders here, or some other calamity? Best not be neglecting their duty. HMPH. Anyway, let's find her first. Frowning slightly, Gaia then ceased to ponder further. Most of the nymphs who stood by her side were originally plants that Mother Earth had planted beside her in the ancient times, later intertwined with the golden apple. As long as she found their origins, even if their elfin bodies had perished, Gaia could create new ones for them with the prime liquid from the life vase. Now, Mother Earth urgently wanted to know what had happened on Earth during her slumber that made everything seem so unfamiliar to her. C389. Chapter 103. The Mountain Collapses _2. With a single step, as Gaia's figure re-emerged, she found herself at the entrance to her orchard. As the embodiment of the earth, such distances were clearly insignificant to her. She surveyed the orchard that appeared to have gone untended for a long while. Mother Earth furrowed her brow once more, then she pushed open the wooden fence and slowly stepped inside. However, after only a few steps, Gaia quickly realized something was amiss. As this, moved by someone? No, they left on their own. As Gaia walked through the orchard, she couldn't find what she was looking for. The spots that should have been planted with vegetation were now empty, leaving behind only pits of various sizes. Without a doubt, they had been dug up by someone, but this was certainly not the work of an outsider. Even if there really were external enemies, they would have been brought into the orchard by a nymph. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the intruders might be, they would have been stopped by the force left by Mother Earth, and then awakened the ancient primordial deity. This wasn't even coercion, but a voluntary act. After all, their essences were protected within the orchard, and as long as no one was willing to lead the way, outsiders would never be able to enter. After a moment of silence, an ominous premonition rose in Gaia's heart. Previously, she had thought that the nymphs of the outside world had provoked a deity and were thus casually killed, which admittedly made her somewhat displeased, but not truly enraged. After all, the nymphs were not that important, and they had not died completely. If only she found that deity and made him express his sincere apologies, Gaia felt she wouldn't really care much about it. However, the scene before her now proved that things were not so simple. To deceive or seduce Gaia's maidens, to stealthily infiltrate the golden apple orchard. If the intruders claimed ignorance of this, inevitably bringing Mother Earth's thunderous wrath upon them, that would be an impossibility. He knew too much, even aware of the barrier Gaia had left behind, and yet he dared to do so, which meant there must be some immense temptation worth the risk. And in this orchard, the only thing of sufficient value. A flash of yellow light, and in the next instant, Gaia stood in the very center of the orchard. Stay updated with MVL. Golden branches swayed with the wind. The tall golden apple tree posed elegantly, seemingly no different from usual on the surface. But this ridiculous and stiff illusion couldn't even deceive the attentive nymphs, so how could it ever fool Mother Earth, who had been with the golden apple tree for tens of thousands of years? With a grip of her right hand, as power surged, the illusion shattered, revealing the true scene before Gaia. A huge pit, with a few golden leaves scattered around. Like other areas of the orchard, the once tall sacred tree was long gone without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a mockery of a hole in the ground. Quote. Staring at everything before her, the atmosphere above the entire Delphic Great Plains, centered on the orchard, became oppressively still, as if everything had frozen in time. After a while, with an expressionless face, Gaia reached out and grasped faintly, and in the next moment, amid a surge of light, a slender nymph fairy tumbled and fell at her feet. Quote. Cough cough. Who dares? Your Highness. Your Highness, thank goodness, you have finally awakened. The initial vigilance turned to joy, as the loyal maid got up from the ground, bowing slightly in front of Mother Earth. The recent rapid changes had left her at a loss, but fortunately, she had waited for Mother Earth to awaken. Yet in front the maid, Gaia did not even glance at her, continuing to look at the pit. Awakening to such circumstances made it difficult for Mother Earth to articulate her feelings. All she wanted to know now was what exactly had happened during this time. Speak. Tell me what you know. Explain all of this. Who has been here, when it turned into this, and what have you done? Quote. Your Highness, I do not know. Shaking her head, the nymph did not know what to say. Previously, the oracle was managed by Moanda, so much so that when she disappeared, it was a long while before anyone noticed the missing life vase. It was only after the situation in the Golden Apple Orchard was discovered, did they consult with everyone on the Great Plains about the matter, and then they shockingly realized that quite a few nymphs had silently vanished. Along with them, the divine artifacts within the Grand Temple had also disappeared. Not long after you fell into slumber, the Divine King His Majesty had gone to the temple for sacrificial worship. After that, the situation in the orchard was discovered, the golden apple tree seemed to have a problem, and many people went missing. Everyone was afraid, and many fled, but some stayed behind. We went to the temple to investigate, and your life vase was gone. What did you say? Boom. The ground trembled slightly, causing all creation to shake along with it. The nymph did not keep her footing and fell back to the ground, while before her, Gaia's shock and anger could no longer be contained. She had not noticed this before, or rather, she thought it was because she had just awakened, so much so that she hadn't felt the lively essence from the symbiotic divine artifact. But now, as the nymph's words ended, Gaia nearly instantaneously searched for the life vase's aura. However, the result disappointed her once more. In Mother Earth's perception, not only was the divine artifact nowhere to be found, but even the mysterious connection between it and the symbiotic divine artifact seemed to have been severed. She was like she had never owned the life vase at all, unable to detect the slightest trace of it. C 390. Chapter 103. The Mountain Collapses _3. Quote. After a long silence, Gaia casually grabbed a nymph before her, and in an instant, she arrived at the Temple of Delphi. Looking around, in the presence of Mother Earth, the oracle, which had been dedicated to worshipping the gods, inexplicably had a huge serpent's corpse, and in the air around, a special power was dispersing. Some of it belonged to Zeus, some to a strange breath that was connected to Zeus, and some Gaia was very familiar with, the essence of the golden apple. They had all been here not long ago, perhaps within a day. So, this is how it is. At this moment, everything became clear. Gaia didn't even notice the traces Arabus had deliberately left for her, but she had fully understood the cause and effect. The new divine king, to consolidate his divine court, chose to sire divine children with his own bloodline, and to ensure their swift growth, Zeus cast his gaze upon the golden apple tree. He had experienced the power of such a divine object, and the more he understood, the more he would desire it, naturally. Thus, Zeus used certain methods unknown to Mother Earth, broke through the barriers she had set, and even took away the life vase along with it. Her rationality teetered on the brink of collapse, but Gaia still had some things she couldn't figure out, why Zeus would dare to offend her so, to even unashamedly allow his offspring to ascend at her doorstep, after succeeding. To be cautious, she still suppressed the anger in her chest and asked the nymph in front of her. What has Zeus done over the past few hundred years? What has become of the defeated titans? The nymph, once again thrown to the ground by Mother Earth, coughed twice, but still began to recall seriously. Without Gaia's presence, Delphi was isolated and rarely received information from the deity race. However, she still knew a thing or two about the most widely known events. Cough. Your Highness, the affairs among the gods seldom reach here. I only know that the Divine King seems to have created a new generation of humans, and, before, he also cast Lord Creus into the abyss. Zeus. Boom. Without restraint any longer, even if there were still some unresolved issue, it was no longer important. The materials for creating humans could not possibly appear out of nowhere, and the act of imprisoning the Titans clearly showed Zeus's attitude toward her. At that moment, Gaia felt an unprecedented sense of humiliation. That Junior dared to treat her, the mother of all gods, in such a way, not only behaving so openly but even creating humans at her doorstep, allowing his offspring to ascend here. Huff. Taking a deep breath, Gaia turned to leave. But as if she thought of something, she suddenly turned back, gazing at the nymph on the ground. The golden apple has disappeared, the life vase is gone, what about you? What? Not understanding Gaia's meaning, the nymph slightly lifted her head, only to meet Gaia's sharp gaze directly. What I mean is, they're all gone, why are you still alive? Divine light surged, sweeping across the Delphic Great Plains in an instant. In a blink, all spirits were extinguished, and heaven and earth fell silent. This immense power even extended outwards, wantonly destroying everything, and in the blink of an eye, the vast land fell silent. He. Ha 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 ha. You all deserve to die, especially you, Zeus. With each word carefully articulated, the earth trembled under Gaia's raging anger. This unbridled behavior immediately drew a warning from the current order, but this was obviously not of concern to Mother Earth at the moment. Uranus, Laine, Arabus, they all, without exception, hadn't taken her seriously. But no matter what, they were at least ancient gods of the same level as Gaia. But you, what give you the right, Zeus? And so, the next moment, a grand halo ascended, bringing the third magnificent spectacle to the night of the mortal realm. If one were to look down from the highest heavens, they could see a river of light converging and rolling westward. And the destination of this river is the abode of the gods, Mount Olympus. The long night is almost over, Lady Night's hem begins to leave the sky, and at the junction of sea and sky, the first threads of dawn shine through, bringing a bit of light to this world. At this moment, atop Mount Olympus, the atmosphere is strange and tense. It's not just because of the birth of Athena, Hestia's questioning, or even the divine king's wanton reactions, but also due to the increasingly evident trembling of the earth. Gaia had slept, which many deities knew. And from the current situation, this was undoubtedly a sign of her awakening, and it was even noticeable that Mother Earth was not in a good mood. Continue reading stories on MVL. None dared provoke this recluse primordial goddess, even lately, no one had visited Delphi, so her bad mood must be due to something else. Like the god of meteorology in the abyss, or perhaps Apollo who had just slaughtered the python, staining the plains with the blood of the monster, and ultimately, everything traced back to the divine king. If it had been earlier, the gods might have worried for the divine court, as they still longed for the existence of faith, and the relatively weak divine king seemed more manageable than the primordial deities in need of faith to heal their wounds. But today's successive changes have left them overwhelmed, hearts scattered, and if Zeus could not smoothly overcome the challenge of Mother Earth, perhaps the divine court, born only a few hundred years earlier, would crumble today. C. 391. Chapter 103. The Mountain Collapses _4. In the past, the succession of divine kings was guided by destiny, and each exchange had the power to affect the world's structure, with even the laws of this age adjusting accordingly. But now, quite a few deities present felt they were about to witness history. The divine king, who had only occupied the throne for a few hundred years, might become the butt of a joke that chaos would tell for eternity in the future. Gaia, it seems my great-grandmother has awakened. Seated in the main seat of the hall, Zeus had also sensed this, but unlike what the other gods had thought, the divine king had long been looking forward to this moment. Since she's awake, let's go see her. But I hope she doesn't look too old this time, ha 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 ha. He laughed fearlessly, and under the gazes of other gods, which likened him to a madman, Zeus flew out of the palace. Next to the divine king's throne, Hera, adorned with a golden crown, had forgotten her anger and her questions for Athena, only clenching her fists before quickly following. Hestia sighed, unsure of what to say, but she too flew out of the palace, heading towards where the presence of Mother Earth was emanating from. They were all aware of Creus's imprisonment, and regardless of what Zeus had done, the goddess of Hearthfire felt she had a role in it as well. One after another, the goddesses departed, and the atmosphere in the hall grew even denser. Apollo, who had just joined the divine court, stood up. He didn't know if today's events were related to him, but the young deity didn't plan on hiding. So, he gave a friendly smile to the goddess, who he wasn't sure if he should call sister or half-sister, and then he turned into light and disappeared. The remaining gods exchanged looks and followed suit, determined to witness the event, whether they were involved or not. Soon, only Athena was left alone in the now empty hall. She pondered the direction in which the gods had departed, pursed her lips, and then turned towards a different direction. New to this world, everything felt unfamiliar to her. However, the goddess at least had no intention of opposing the divine king or battling Mother Earth, nor did she think she had the power to do so at the moment. And like the other deities, Athena did not wish to spectate this fight, for she deemed it meaningless. Even though it hadn't yet arrived, the terrifying presence of Mother Earth was palpably clear. The struggle between the divine king and Mother Earth was not for the other gods to decide. Since she couldn't determine the outcome, Athena preferred to do something else rather than watch the battle. For instance, go to a place she felt a connection to, a place that might have once been inhabited by the mother goddess she had never met. She didn't know if it was normally visited, but now, she assumed no one would stop her. Stepping out of the palace with thunder in hand, Zeus watched the earth and light approach in the distance. Hera soon appeared behind him, and the other gods gradually arrived, keeping their distance from the divine king rather than approaching. Zeus didn't look back, but he was aware of everything behind him. The divine king did not pay attention to the gods' evasiveness. Instead, he slightly turned to look at his heavenly empress. Do you feel it, Hera? This was how he once felt. What? Confused, Hera didn't understand what Zeus was talking about. He seemed different today, not as arrogant as he usually was. I mean our father god, Hera. Zeus shook his head with a smile, not the least bit tense, even finding the time to reminisce about the past as the divine presence grew closer. I guess, back on Mount Othrys, he waited for us in much the same way. Now, I finally understand his feelings. Abandoned by all, standing alone, wielding immense power, yet only a few stood by his side. Even the mother goddess, although she stood beside him, did not fight for him. But Hera, you are different, you know what you want. Just on this point alone, he doesn't measure up to me, ha ha ha. With a hearty laugh, without waiting for Hera's response, Zeus stepped forward. Enjoy new chapters from MVL. Looking at the surging yellow light screen, though Divine King Zeus had planned to fight with Gaia today regardless, he felt he should say something before that. And Creus alone should not warrant Mother Earth initiating a fight upon her arrival. However, the next moment, Zeus unexpectedly discovered that the incoming light, upon noticing him, not only did not stop but accelerated even more. Hey, a show of force, huh? Very well then, come forth. Without a hint of fear, Zeus advanced instead of retreating, his thunder held high. Facing the formless embodiment of Mother Earth and accompanied by a surge of power, his resounding voice echoed through heaven and earth. Gaia, that's enough, this is not your affair to meddle in. The earth may be your domain, but there isn't a place in the world that isn't the territory of the Divine King. Thunder descended, countless silver serpents fell from the sky, colliding with the rising yellow tide. To the astonishment of the gods, like history replaying itself, the sky and the earth collided, and the thunderous sound of that moment even reached the underworld, causing Hades in the divine palace to startle and change color. Zeus, it really is you. The yellow light dissipated, not from a lack of power, but because Gaia actively withdrew it. Her figure re-emerged between heaven and earth, her sharp eyes fixed on the divine king before her. Such abnormal strength, such arrogant demeanor. The other party was not at all surprised by her arrival but was instead well prepared. It seems this was the reasoning and confidence behind all of Zeus's actions. The conjecture in her heart solidified into certainty, and in this moment, Gaia's last doubt was dispelled. It was him, this shameless junior. He had stolen her treasure and then had the audacity to look down on her, saying it was not her affair. Zeus, you despicable thief. Hand over the golden apple and return my divine artifact, or else no matter the cost, I will never let you off easy. The innate power of a primordial deity comes from instinct and can fluctuate wildly with emotions. Undoubtedly, under the sky at this moment, Gaia's fury was comparable to the end of the first epic. The shaking of the earth grew more violent, and even the sea connected to the land began to surge with great waves. Yet, across from Mother Earth, Zeus was somewhat baffled. Golden apple, divine artifact, what are you talking about? Originally, his heart was surging with the will to battle, but facing the sudden accusation from Mother Earth, Zeus didn't just hesitate, he had no idea what the other party was talking about. What golden apple tree? The only thing he could relate to this was Hera's planting of a golden apple tree branch, which, with Demeter's help, had taken root and sprouted, and had now been sent out to sea as part of an oath. As for the true divine tree, wasn't that still by the side of Mother Earth? Without time to think it through, but guided by past experience, Zeus almost instantaneously sensed that something was wrong. He was prepared to ask more questions when Mother Earth in front of him lost all interest in conversation. In Gaia's eyes, Zeus's response at this moment was completely another form of mockery. Since the Divine King had made such an unabashed act at Delphi before, who was he performing for now? Very well, Zeus, very well, you humiliate me, the mother of all gods. Word by word, the once flowing divine power seemed to ignite, reflecting off Gaia's ashen complexion. Under the gaze of all gods in heaven and earth, Mother Earth finally abandoned the last of her hopes. Since this is the case, Zeus, no matter what power you've relied on, today, no one will have an easy time. Without further words, supreme divine power enveloped her. Facing Zeus, who still seemed to want to say something, Gaia lunged forward. Her target was no longer Zeus himself, because facing the greatly empowered Divine King, she might not easily be victorious. Perhaps it was a reversal of fortune, but at that moment, Gaia seemed to regain some tactical wisdom. She understood immediately how to weaken her opponent. The earth was her home turf, but Olympus was not. This was the ancestral mountain transformed from the divine body, also the pillar that supported the sky in the east. Here, her advantage was cut off, while the divine kings would increase. With that in mind, then she would do as Cronus once did and bring this mount of the gods crashing down. C. 392. Chapter 104. Memories in the Depths of Wisdom. Before Mount Olympus, Mother Earth advanced in anger. With Zeus by her side, her first strike might not have been able to shatter the mount of the gods, but as long as she tried enough times, she would eventually succeed. After all, strictly speaking, there was still a gap in their powers, even if it wasn't as evident with Gaia leading the offensive. However, at this moment, standing opposite Mother Earth, Zeus, perplexed as he was, felt an urge to laugh. Although he was inexplicably blamed for a great deal, it did indeed enrage the divine king. Gaia's recent proclamation had put him on high alert, for after all, Mother Earth was one of the first primordial gods, and no one knew what other means she might have. Should she resolve to injure both sides, Zeus feared it really wouldn't end well for him. Previously, Zeus had anticipated that it would never come to this. When Gaia realized she could not defeat him, and the divine king provided her a way out, everything would end smoothly. He would have successfully established his authority, and Mother Earth would have lost face, but it wasn't anything too serious, considering it wasn't her first time. Afterwards, both would make up as before, which was the limit of what he could achieve now. After all, while Gaia might indeed be unable to defeat others on the earth, conversely, it was also difficult for anyone to defeat her. However, all of that came to an end in the face of Mother Earth's sudden battle wisdom. When Gaia approached Mount Olympus, Zeus entirely saw the possibility of subduing her on the spot. On the whole, Gaia was still stronger than him at this moment, and as for the battle itself, Mother Earth's response was actually just right. As the embodiment of the earth, she should be favored on every part of the continent, except for Mount Olympus, since it was the mountain god's divine body realized, a territory beyond her authority. Thus, the existence of this divine mountain affected the balance between them, diminishing her advantage, while Zeus's divine authority remained intact. If he could destroy it, it would undoubtedly change the fragile balance between them at this moment. Yet, immersed in her epiphany, Mother Earth had clearly forgotten one issue. Why had she slept for hundreds of years? Why was the display of divine power forbidden in the present world? And in the end, why was the earth the most strictly bound by the prohibition of divine power, followed by the sea, then the sky, and why was it not so evident in the underworld? That was naturally because, in the eyes of the present world, all the changes at the turn of the eras placed the shift of the sun at the very end. The East Sea occupied the runner-up spot. After all, it brought the ceaseless flow of sea vents. The collapse of the sky pillar and the sinking of the earth were what the laws truly couldn't tolerate. So at this moment, Zeus could clearly feel that the pressure of the laws that lingered around because of the recent clash with Mother Earth had dissipated almost instantly. It even urged the divine king to maintain order. On Gaia, however, the pressure increased geometrically in an attempt to stop the mad primordial god. Sensing all of this, a subtle smile appeared on Zeus's lips. He channeled his transformative power into the arrows of thunder, sending the powerful divine artifact flying out to collide with the advancing Mother Earth. But, by coincidence or not, the divine king couldn't stop all of Gaia's power. Instead, a minuscule portion leaked by accident, heading towards the rear, specifically at Mount Olympus. Boom. What was minimal for the great beings was still enough to shake the land, and even such a rare divine mountain could not escape unscathed. Accompanied by a massive rumble, Mount Olympus shook twice, and the sky to the east swayed along with it, making it seem as if it would collapse the next moment. However, fortunately, as a mountain range transformed from the mountain god Oria's divine body, Mount Olympus was extremely sturdy. And Gaia's wrathful strike was mostly blocked by the thunder, failing to genuinely pour onto the divine mountain. Thus, under the horrified gazes of the gods, the majestic mountain shook several times but ultimately did not collapse. It still stood tall in the east. However, what followed was the rolling of falling rocks into the earth, palaces and towers turning into rubble, and the few lives still in the mountains that hadn't had the chance to leave became dust in the face of the overwhelming force. Enjoy exclusive chapters from MVL. Yet, at the same time, because this scene was very similar to the epical transition, the laws of the present world increased the magnitude of the chains binding Mother Earth even more. Gaia, although you once helped me, I still haven't figured out what your vacillating stance at the time was all about. You always had the ability to turn a situation that I envied into what it is now, then helplessly resent fate's injustice. Zeus murmured softly. Without sufficient faith, without a complete set of 12 pillars, he couldn't have done anything to the mother goddess. But as he casually summoned back the divine artifact and looked at Gaia before him, the divine king suddenly was in no mood to explain anything about the golden apple. He would fight first, seize this rare opportunity to trample this old grandmother underfoot. When his authority was founded on the defeat of a primordial god, and as the victor, he would then ask her what gave her the courage to dare to slander the king of all gods. Outside the Mount of the Gods, the great battle raged on. At this juncture, even the servants who once served the deities fled in all directions, with those remaining perishing under the recent strike, leaving the skies above Olympus deserted. C. 393. Chapter 104 Memories in the Depths of Wisdom _2. Amidst the rubble and collapsed buildings, only a slender figure weaved through. The ground was littered with broken wood and stone, but this was thanks to the fact that these palaces were the dwellings of deities, after all. If it weren't for the residual divine power protecting them, they would have likely ended up like those lives caught in an unjust disaster, not even leaving a body behind. Thus, following a faint intuition, the goddess quickly moved through the ruins of the collapsed buildings. The roaring outside the mountain grew fiercer as if the warring parties had finally realized something and were frantically unleashing their power. Now and then, some shockwaves would strike Mount of the Gods, but Athena foresaw them and avoided each one. Until at a certain moment, stepping over an overturned column, the goddess, who appeared no more than 16 or 17 years old, finally found her destination. It was a long deserted chamber, seemingly sealed by some mysterious force for many years. Indeed, it was precisely because the force entirely sealed it off that its defenses outperformed other buildings, allowing this secluded palace to survive under Gaia's power and become one of the rare exceptions on Mount Olympus. C. 3-11. However, the power of the seal had its limits, and now, that incomprehensible force had dissipated in the collision. There was nothing left that could stop a deity. Observing this scene, Athena fell silent for a moment, then stepped forward to push open the grand doors. The sound of the doors opening should have been loud, but it seemed imperceptible under the thunderous noise from outside the mountain. She flashed into the palace, then shut the doors behind her. Instead of the elaborate decorations and exquisite carvings of other temples, there were only several paintings hanging on the walls, seemingly the masterpieces of the room's previous owner. Walking slowly forward, Athena's bright eyes surveyed everything in the palace. The paintings on the walls were different from each other, seemingly recording the moments most deeply etched in the previous owner's memory. The creation of the golden generation of life, spreading hydrology across the sea, the previous divine king leveling the ocean in battle, and meeting the blonde youth for the first time on an unnamed island. Perhaps it was an innate closeness to art, perhaps bolstered by the scepter of wisdom, Athena soon resonated with the emotions contained within the paintings. Despite never having met her, Métis' image gradually filled her mind. Enjoy new tales from Emma. A goddess who loved knowledge, delighted in sharing wisdom, once valued kinship, and later placed an even greater importance on love. Quote. Shaking her head, Athena turned away. She had not lived through that era after all, and a few paintings were hardly enough to piece together the complete picture, so she merely collected the scrolls and went towards the true sleeping chamber. Tap, tap. After a short walk down the hallway, the young girl soon arrived at a place resembling a study. The room was of moderate size with a bed against the wall, designed for the room's owner to rest amidst her busy schedule. Not far from the bed, a wooden table was covered with parchment scrolls, and even on the table lay an open piece of parchment with a quill placed at its side, its ink filled with a divine aura and not yet exhausted. One could imagine that the room's owner was likely in the midst of writing something here when, for some reason, she briefly left one day. Little did she know she would never return, and neither would anyone else enter this room again. Thus, her belongings remained forever on that table. As this, witchcraft, and also, elements and divine power. Stepping closer, Athena, endowed with hydrology, easily recognized the material, even though the person who wrote them used many personalized terms and directional remarks, but this did not perplex the successor of the same godhood. At just a glance, Athena realized they were the previous owner's attempts to decipher a power known as witchcraft, and she had already made some progress. Her research was rough, but it had formed a rough framework and system. However, compared to the initial samples of research, she did not want to use magic power as the foundation for this new system. Flipping through the past manuscripts, Athena gradually realized why she had researched this power. Initially, it was out of curiosity. The author of these manuscripts, having witnessed the wonders of witchcraft, hoped to understand its underlying principles. Later, due to some premonitions, she invested more energy into it. Perhaps it was a warning from the scepter of wisdom, or maybe she accidentally glimpsed a corner of the future, but either way, she foresaw some change in the laws. Perhaps one day, the deities would be restrained on earth because of their reckless actions, so upon realizing this, she secretly began her research into this unique power, trying to divinize it. In the process, she shared her speculations with the divine king, who had not yet ascended the throne. However, he did not truly believe her alarmist talk. He merely documented the matter and naturally changed the topic with the master of the place. In such circumstances, the author of the notes had no choice but to continue the unfinished research alone until one day, she did not return, leaving these manuscripts behind, unnoticed by others henceforth. Quote. Divine arts, is this the name you chose? It's a fitting appellation. A soft voice echoed in the side chamber, and within Athena's hands, divine power and elements merged. The next moment, a glowing sphere appeared in her palm, emitting a warm light, bringing some illumination to this quiet chamber. C. 394. Chapter 104 Memories in the Depths of Wisdom _3. So, what exactly happened? Just as the gods thought, you were swallowed by Zeus, and then I came to be. But now, are you still there? Whispering softly, Athena didn't expect an answer, for her godhood told her it was impossible. There was no other hydrology deity in the world anymore, she was the sole master of that authority. About that, I'm afraid no one can conclude. In fact, I'm also curious about Métis' whereabouts. Who? In an instant, her normally gentle eyes sharpened, and Athena abruptly turned around. Although her beauty, as bright-eyed maiden, protector of the city, among goddesses she shines, as often recorded in mythology, no one could disregard that her strength was just as renowned as her beauty. Without a sound, the spear of victory fell into her hands, and Athena scanned the area warily, but nothing met her gaze. Quote. There's no need for such precautions, in fact, I have been here even before you came. If we're really talking about it, you are the later arrival. The gentle voice came again, and the next moment, the void trembled, and a figure cloaked in black emerged. He looked at Athena and also at the manuscript in front of her, issuing a sigh that came from the heart. I'm just someone like you, seeking the truth. In fact, I'd seen her when Métis was still an infant. I just never expected that she would come to such an unknown end. Just like Prometheus, huh? Is it that every self-proclaimed wise one is bound to make a fatal mistake? Laine couldn't tell whether it was the influence of destiny, their own nature that decided all this, or perhaps, it was a result promoted by both since their personality was, to begin with, a part of their fate. Regardless, he was determined to understand the causes and effects today, to determine the source of the divine king's power, as well as Métis' fate. Zeus wouldn't tell the truth, and even if he did, it wouldn't be credible, and there was no other way to find out. So, the only one who could possibly have the answers was Athena, who herself had only a partial understanding. In the secluded palace, the atmosphere gradually eased from its previous tension. In fact, just as Laine said, he had arrived at this palace even before Athena did. The outside world was in the throes of battle, and he didn't know whether any other spectated this drama of divine king versus Mother Earth. After all, the other two primordial gods of his generation were extremely adept at concealing their whereabouts. But Laine could almost guess that even if they came, they would probably focus on the suddenly strengthened Zeus, while what kind of person Métis was might be something they would hardly recall. However, Laine didn't indulge in such futility. He bypassed Gaia and the other deities, directly seeking the source of the problem. The sudden increase in power, some phenomenon resembling a ritual, and the feeling of an interconnection with the current laws, all of these indicated that something unexpected had happened to him, yet to find out the cause from Zeus himself was decidedly unrealistic. Stay updated through M. After all, even if he told you and it sounded plausible, no one could guarantee that the divine king hadn't deliberately withheld any key information. So rather than wasting effort there, it was better to search for the answers himself. For instance, the most crucial clue, all of this must be inextricably linked to the slip of Métis' godhood. Therefore, after only a short search, Laine arrived here, at the place once inhabited by the Oceanides. He saw what they had left behind, and then, unsurprisingly, waited until Athena arrived soon after. But unlike her complex emotions, Laine only lamented Métis' fate briefly. After all, everyone should be responsible for their own choices. She voluntarily chose Zeus, so it seemed not so strange that she ended up in her current situation. Whoever you are, it seems you've come for His Majesty the Divine King. In the side hall, having seen Laine's emerging figure, Athena's eyes flickered momentarily before she sheathed her weapon. She didn't maintain unnecessary vigilance because Laine also didn't conceal his aura from her. After sensing a power even more daunting than that of Zeus and Gaia, the goddess of wisdom understood the deity's intention almost in a breath. He came for the currently battling divine king. For Zeus's abnormal strength, Athena actually didn't know what kind of power the divine king should possess, but the reactions of the gods in the hall earlier all proved one point. In the past, the divine king was far from Gaia's match, yet the battle outside was the complete opposite. Perhaps it was this change that attracted the attention of the deity before her. As for Métis herself, this palace had clearly been vacant for hundreds of years, and although he claimed to have met the ocean-eyed goddess in her infancy, they probably didn't have a close relationship. As for Athena herself, she didn't know what about her freshly born self could possibly interest others. Sort of, the divine king. In fact, I'm not at all surprised about Zeus becoming stronger. In the destiny set out for him, he was meant to grow stronger, but when his method of gaining strength and Métis' disappearance are put together, then it cannot be ignored. C. 395. Chapter 104 Memories in the Depths of Wisdom _4. He nodded slightly, as if praising the girl's intelligence. Laine continued speaking of his purpose, even though the other party may not truly understand it at the moment. Before this, I had tried other methods to probe the underlying reasons, such as interfering with the years, peering into history. Unfortunately, none of these attempts were successful. The world-level changes have obscured the truth behind everything. In front of that kind of power, even great divine power seems insignificant. Luckily, besides Zeus himself, there was another witness at the time. Laine looked toward Athena, and the goddess of wisdom understood his implication. But her impression of memories from before her birth was nothing but a blur. Then I must disappoint you. In truth, I don't remember what happened then. It's okay. You may not remember now, but you can remember. Laine extended his hand, and the void trembled slightly. The next moment, a scroll from an ancient era once again appeared in this world. On its edge, a line of mysterious text flowed and changed, but Athena understood its meaning the instant she saw it. Recognize the world, then recognize yourself. A divine artifact. Quick to judge, Athena realized this was a divine artifact on the same level as her spear of victory and shield of Aegis, yet the disparity in power between them was clearly not insignificant. Yes, it is part of another divine artifact, the immutable past, the carrier of memory, the origin of all things. Perhaps even you cannot remember what happened before you were born, but with its help, you can see the scenes you have once experienced. Placing the parted Genesis artifact on the desk and gently pushing it forward, Laine smiled faintly, then turned away. I'm lending it to you. As for how to use it, I think you'll figure it out, won't you? As he had arrived, so did he leave without any trace. It was as if his presence had never graced this abandoned palace, with only the scroll remaining on the desk. After a moment of silence, looking at the artifact that could certainly be called of unknown origin, Athena still picked up the scroll but did not immediately open it. She needed to find a more suitable place, and this one was clearly not appropriate. The light and shadow shifted, and the next moment, Laine arrived outside Mount Olympus. The trembling of the earth had not stopped, and the sky shook from time to time. The struggle between Zeus and Gaia was still ongoing, or rather, if not for the increasingly strong law suppressing them, they might fight for another 100 years without a clear victor emerging. Strictly speaking, having just completed half a ritual and sorely lacking in faith, Zeus was actually no match for Mother Earth. At best, he could only remain undefeated atop Mount Olympus. However, Gaia's own actions had tipped the scales of victory in his favor. The memories from Athena would take a while to be known, so Laine simply stood by, first trying to analyze the composition of Zeus's power in his own way. Under his gaze, which spanned reality and the source sea, a corner of the divine king's current state was revealed, a power similar yet different from that once wielded by Uranus. 2 fulcrums, 12 supports. At this moment, comparing with the myths of later generations, Laine also roughly understood something. Perhaps the original Zeus had also used a similar method to cross into the Great Realm, only he took a longer time, a more protracted one, and didn't have someone as suitable as the current one. Perhaps in the original trajectory, Zeus had defeated Cronus in the Titan War, but his and the other Titans' struggles did not easily come to an end. He did not capture the other Titans at once, nor did he fear the hidden beings. Somehow, even after ascending to the throne, the gods of the old era still frequently rebelled, causing trouble for the new divine court. Your adventure continues at M. In this process, the children of Zeus gradually came into the world, and he slowly uncovered the mysteries of faith, tentatively establishing the 12 principal gods to strengthen his power. However, compared to the present one, the mythological version was evidently lacking. The most obvious distinction was that the current Zeus and Hera were not counted among the principal gods, they stood alone above them, holding higher status, with Zeus's king far surpassing Hera. Such a ritual was bound to be more stable and more powerful. Whether this deeper emulation of divine right kingship would have any negative effects, Laine did not know. At the very least, one immediate observation was that the divine king's connection with the laws was now closer. This was to a certain extent a good thing but would not be so perpetually. So it all comes down to Métis. Zeus himself could not possibly have suddenly invented such a ritual, even if that was within his grasp in the future. Métis, Asgard, I wonder what our divine King Majesty has done, and what he paid for it. Even though he had not received an answer yet, with the information this complete, Laine could infer some clues. Particularly the subtle changes in the law's origin, which added the concept of accepting sacrifices to the interface. However, no matter concerning the world is minor. A definitive judgment would have to wait until the memory is recreated. That wouldn't take too long, and Laine could afford to wait. As for what to do while waiting, he stretched out his hand, anticipating some unexpected changes, and looked at the gods who were shocked by the divine king's might. The next moment, power surged, directed at these ignorant onlookers. Laine made his move boldly. C. 396. Chapter 105 Unanimous Choice. Halfway up Mount Olympus, the earth clashed with thunder. In the void, the previously invisible laws had begun to show signs of emergence, attempting to stop the clash between the two deities. However, the collision between the divine king and Mother Earth not only failed to cease due to the constraints of the law, but signs indicated it was becoming increasingly intense. For Zeus, such an opportunity would not come a second time, and even if Gaia were to cease at this moment, he might not stop. For Mother Earth, the differential treatment by the chains of order seemed to only further dissolve her scant rationality, making her feel as if all of creation was opposing her. The extreme emotions intensified the innate power of the primordial gods like the collision of heaven and earth. This grand spectacle spread further and further, witnessed by the beings on the continent. They did not know what was happening, only able to guess from the voices previously heard at the edge of the sky that this was a struggle between the divine king of Olympus and Mother Earth Gaia. At that moment, those who did not understand the gods were shocked by their might and recorded various accounts and speculations of this battle. Some were right, some were wrong. For instance, Zeus was seen not just as a symbol of lightning but also as an embodiment of some aspect of the sky. But whether right or wrong, it all became part of the legend, henceforth circulated in the world. Of course, these were all mortal affairs. Compared to that, the gods who knew everything truly found it unbelievable. No one was more aware than they of the insurmountable hierarchy among the deities. They were born powerful but were also confined by their innate godhood, unable to advance further once reaching their peak. Even after discovering that faith could to some degree break these boundaries, as long as it persisted, a deity could possess stronger powers. Yet, such power should not be theirs. At least, the mighty power Zeus now exhibited did not seem like that brought by mere faith. Given the scale of humanity at the time, even if all faith were concentrated on one individual, it might not be enough to reach the peak beneath greatness. Yet the display Zeus showed to the gods was an overwhelming transcendence. He was able to match Gaia in battle, and even as time passed, he seemed to be increasingly gaining the upper hand. Whether or not the gods saw the role of the current order in this, it did not detract from the shock that Zeus brought to them at this moment. The third-generation divine king now had power beyond that of a true god, just like his two predecessors. At this moment, the position of divine king suddenly held a mystical place in their hearts. If it were said that Uranus was a proof of innate strength and his three divine authorities were rightfully strong, and if Cronus's breakthrough were merely an isolated case without further evidence to prove its relation to kingship, then Zeus now undoubtedly told the world that perhaps the position of divine king was indeed special. Perhaps in this era where everything great was shunned by the current world, only the divine king could be an exception to some degree. It was the only proven path capable of directly reaching great divine power. Quote, Your Majesty, the battle is perilous, shall we move back further? As various speculations rose among the gods' hearts, Zephyrus, the god of west wind, asked respectfully beside Hera. Just now, many deities had kept their distance from the divine king. They didn't wish to face the furious Gaia alongside Zeus, but Zephyrus did not. He still expressed his loyalty to the divine king, closely following on the heels of the heavenly Empress. However, it was not because of his immense loyalty, but rather because the wind god had no choice. Unlike other deities, the god of west wind was not inherently of intermediate divine power. The gods were naturally powerful, and since the birth of humans was still brief, they had not been able to rely on the power of faith to break through their ranks. Therefore, to the gods, neither the divine court nor the humans mattered as much as one would think at the moment. Your next chapter is on M. Never having experienced a stronger sensation, they were not too eager or reluctant about it. In their view, the worst outcome of this battle would be the defeat of the divine king, the crumbling of the divine court, and Mother Earth monopolizing the faith of humans. But the deficit of primordial gods will one day be replenished, and humans will ultimately belong to the gods, just delayed a bit. However, what the other deities could disregard was not true for Zephyrus. Without the pardon of 2 generations of divine kings, he would not be the leader of the wind gods. He would lose not only the right to spread the power of faith promised by the divine king, but also the domain of intermediate divine power, reverting back to a once weaker state, c2 to 38, 3 to 9. At that time, no matter who the next divine king would be, they were unlikely to keep him in his position but would be replaced by the other 3 wind gods. Faced with such a situation, Zephyrus instead firmly stood by Zeus's side. And now, looking at it, the god of west wind had once again made the right choice, successfully aligning himself with the victor. However, amidst the regretful and envious gazes of many deities, Zephyrus felt privately elated, yet he couldn't help but also feel strangely again. Sometimes he wondered, although minor or major accidents always occurred when he was commanded to act, his own luck seemed to be quite good. Not only did he successfully complete his tasks every time, but during the change of divine kings and the invasion of Mother Earth, he had made the right choices both times. There's no need. As the heavenly empress, how could I possibly hide behind others? C 397. Chapter 105 Unanimous Choice _ 2. The god of the west wind silently reflected, and before him, faced with Zephyrus's suggestion, Hera resolutely refused. In some respects, the heavenly empress and Zeus truly shared similarities. Neither could be regarded as a standard definition of a good person, yet neither lacked the courage to confront danger. Before the divine king revealed his strength, she had dared to stand here, and now that Zeus clearly had the upper hand, she had no thoughts of retreat. However, looking at the god of the west wind beside her, Hera's gaze softened. The divine king will remember your loyalty, Zephyrus, and compared to the other deities, you have proven yourself with your actions, she said. Perhaps you are not as naturally powerful as some deities, but in the era of faith, that is not an issue. The divine king once told me that the status of the gods should rise and fall by his command, not by natural strength or weakness. Perhaps you are worthy of a higher position. Quote, This is merely my duty, your majesty, he said. Taking a deep breath, the god of the west wind bowed once more, his heart filled with tremendous excitement. A correct choice in the second era elevated him to possess intermediate divine power, truly entering the upper echelons of the gods, and now another choice laid the path of great divine power before him. Even considering the heavenly empress's intent, perhaps he might also have a chance to sit in one of those 12 principal godly thrones. Lost in his reverie, Zephyrus stood by Hera's side like a guard. The battle in the sky grew more intense, but Mother Earth's decline became increasingly evident. The god of the west wind silently awaited the end of it all. However, at a certain moment, a nameless terror surged within Zephyrus's heart. He abruptly looked up, searching for the source of danger, yet despite looking around, he saw nothing. Everything was the same as before, as though it was merely an illusion. But the growing sense of fear in his heart told him that something was definitely happening. This is. Opening his mouth, he wanted to say something, but Zephyrus quickly found he could not speak a word. His voice had vanished, as if devoured by some force, followed by light, vision, and even the perception of everything. Bit by bit, piece by piece, everything was obscured, as if all was enveloped in darkness. It felt like an instant passed, or maybe countless years. In this place, Time itself seemed non-existent, without any measure to gauge it. Until a moment came when a sound akin to the creation of heaven and earth boomed, and the darkness before him was torn asunder by some tremendous force. Huff! Ha! He gasped. Light reappeared before Zephyrus's eyes, but he could scarcely muster any strength. The wind god merely gasped for breath, trembling unconsciously like a mortal who had skirted the edges of death. You've grown stronger. A detached voice came from beside the wind god, prompting him to turn and look. There, a figure with indistinct features looked toward the void in the distance. Both the divine king and Mother Earth, drawn by this sudden disturbance, turned their gaze in that direction, but the mysterious person merely nodded at Zeus, not far off, then vanished into the void. For a moment, the exterior of Mount Olympus fell silent, yet this was but a brief respite. Before long, with another challenge from Gaia, the battle reignited. So it is, Zeus, no wonder I couldn't sense the presence of the golden apple on Mount Olympus. You've collaborated with him. Although uncertain why Arabus did what he did, his recent action undoubtedly proved this point. So, watching Zeus still feigning ignorance, Gaia, disregarding the restrained power, launched another offensive. In an instant, deep within the starry skies. Boom! Unlike the restricted battle on the great Earth, in the vastness of space, several star domains were ripped apart in a blink, numerous celestial bodies turned to dust. However, the force that had just collided retracted immediately after contact, moving on to further reaches. Perhaps it happened a few times, or perhaps thousands of times. At some moment, on the very edge of the starry sky, close to a realm beyond the world, those two inscrutable forces finally differed ever so slightly in might. Rip! With the last sound fading, Laine's figure emerged. The colors black and white dissipated from his hands, and opposite him, Arabus also stood, only the torn edges of his clothing testified to the result of their recent clash. Clearly, in the brief encounter, for the first time, the power between the two ancient gods had shifted. After making up for the deficiencies of divine power, so this is the strength of spirituality, at this moment. No, if not for that authority which split from the cycle of power, meant to end all things, you wouldn't be much stronger than me, Arabus reflected. The divine power flowed, and the torn edges of the garment were mended. Arabus seemed to show no displeasure about having lost a move just now. But this is just the beginning, he said calmly. With a calm demeanor, Laine simply stated the facts. The first era we met, your power was such, and now, it remains the same. For millions of years, it has almost never changed, he observed. Perhaps, as the world's source power rose, the quantity of your power increased, but your symbolic ratio in the world has not changed in the slightest. However, within the domain of the latter half of great divine power, this is far more important than the mere accumulation of quantity. As Laine said, if in the first half of great divine power it might be possible for the world to elevate, and the deities to rise with the tide, in the latter half, such ease would no longer be found. C. 398. Chapter 105 Unanimous Choice _ 3. The higher the position, the more significant the role of concepts becomes. Perhaps, compared to the beginning of creation, the power of darkness has indeed increased quite a bit, but its proportion in the overall world has actually declined. Therefore, Arabus's power did not fall, but neither did it rise. However, this is actually the normal phenomenon. In a world where order is strictly maintained, the higher the layer, the more difficult it is to continue moving forward. Maybe so, but that will be a concern for later. Unmoved, the Lord of Darkness was not angered by Laine's words. He simply dissipated his form and continued to embody the most primal darkness. At least for now, Laine, you cannot surpass me. The voice echoed in the starry sky, and with it spread a hidden and all-consuming power. This was the true darkness, an endless depth, the world before the birth of light. It stood before Laine, forming an immense canopy, cutting off his path to and from the earth. However, listening to the Lord of Darkness and looking at Arabus, who seemed to truly stand on Zeus's side for some reason, attempting to wholeheartedly stop him, Laine instead gave a small smile. If Gaia might have forgotten that he could traverse every corner of the world with the help of the spirit realm, how could the Lord of Darkness forget? The ease with which he followed Laine into the stars once again proved his guess. So watching the other party, Laine said slowly. It seems, at that moment just now when you isolated the gods, you did have a difficult time. Quote. As Laine finished speaking, the darkness across from him suddenly fell silent, but Laine nodded with a smile. What happened in the brief moment before seemed like Arabus had taken Zeus's side, stopping Laine's power from attacking the gods, but the reality was far from it. It was a coincidence, and also a trial. In that short instant, two ancient gods intended to move against those spectating deities. Laine had many purposes, such as seeing whether the force supporting this right's principal god, if cut off from the divine king's connection, could still exist. Or whether the main bodies of destiny in the current era, after being influenced by him for 2 full epochs, were still unbreakable. The Lord of Darkness probably had fewer objectives. He likely just wanted to test the former, wishing to see if there were any significant flaws in the power of this new divine king. Thus, he enveloped the gods in darkness with his power, and in the next moment, he received the answer he sought. But he received it, and Laine did not. Thus, acting half a beat slower, Laine did not hold back but instead shifted his attack to Arabus, all the way to the depths of the starry sky. You ascribe your disadvantage to the dominion of death. Do you want me to try it out as well? No need, you've already given me the answer. Calmly, everything was clear. In that instant of obscuring the gods, Arabus was hurt, and while not as strong as he thought, the fact that great divine power was injured proved something. Yet facing Laine's consequent attack, the Lord of Darkness subconsciously chose to hide it. He pretended to be unharmed, trying to make the other misjudge, but the outcome was clear. If Laine's power was about the same as at the turn of the epochs, he might actually not have noticed any rise or fall in Arabus's power, but now it was different. Soon, the reaction of the canopy in front of him further confirmed his guess. As Laine's words finished, the darkness in front began to waver noticeably, and without a sound, as if it had never existed, the other silently disappeared before him. Clearly, upon realizing his efforts were in vain, Arabus did not persist but chose to leave directly. The starry sky returned to tranquility once again, with only the silent, shattered celestial bodies recounting what had transpired here. With a wave of his hand, as if time was reversing, everything returned to its original state. Standing in the void, Laine pondered for a moment. Although brief, that moment was enough to discern some outcomes. When the gods were enveloped by the power of darkness, they indeed briefly lost their connection to the right, but this didn't seem to bring about an immediate weakening of the divine king. To be exact, it was more like a true god cast into the abyss. Although their connections to the present world were severed, the laws related to godhood did not immediately fail, but rather there was a long process in between. By comparison, the more direct betrayal of a deity could cause a greater impact. Like when Zeus and his brothers entered the abyss, the rules they represented did not fall into immediate disarray, but when they actively wielded their godhood, they could cause more severe natural disasters and turmoil. However, direct betrayal by a deity. With that thought, the injury Arabus had just suffered now seemed much more glaring. After all, if the main body of destiny still has such strong inertia, if she is still firmly grasping the core trajectory unwaveringly, then can so-called betrayal truly occur? Perhaps it can occur, only to be corrected by some coincidence, mending whatever might be lacking. 2 epochs have passed, and destiny is still so stubborn. After a moment of silence, although this was actually expected, it did not mean it could be readily accepted. Changes to minor details only really affect those minor details, but the alternation of 3 generations of divine kings has never changed. C. 399. Chapter 105 Unanimous Choice _4. This will not go on forever. Since you are so stubborn when facing others, I wonder if you can still remain unwavering when facing yourself. The voice gradually became colder. 20,000 years of attempts had been long enough. If this gentle approach was futile, then a change of tactics was unavoidable. Perhaps, as he had always believed, the world itself was his true obstruction. Thus, Laine looked toward the earth, toward the only deity on Mount Olympus. First, wait for a result, then make a decision. In any case, the river of fate for this world must be thoroughly severed in the third era, and all that follows must become utterly unknown. If mere scheming cannot solve it, then let's use absolute power to tear apart the laws of the current world. Recalling the recent events in Hemenu world, Laine felt, perhaps it was not an impossible feat. And the Divine King. The position of Divine King was actually quite special. It was closely related to fate, and its succession often signified the change of an era. Thus, at this moment, that long-standing intention resurfaced in Laine's mind. Perhaps the Divine King only needs 3 generations. Above the underworld, the subterranean realm. In the dim underground space, a faint bioluminescence had arisen from nowhere. A kind of moss-emitting light spread everywhere, bringing brightness to this vast world. And in the center of this enormous cavity, a tree that should not exist here swayed with life. It had golden leaves, perfectly proportioned branches, and some new, dark-colored shoots. In front of the giant tree, a group of exquisitely featured beings gathered. They knelt on the ground, worshipping and bowing before the great tree. It looks like you've adapted to life underground. Suddenly, a deep voice rang out beside the tree, and the figure of the Lord of Darkness slowly appeared. He waved his hand, and the nearby creatures were moved away. In front of the golden apple tree, Moanda also walked out from the trunk. As you requested, I have completed the majority. Bowing slightly, Moanda did not know why the other had come, but still she softly spoke. Though she couldn't directly infer anything, her intuition told her the mood of the being before her was not good. Completed the majority. Yes, apart from that egg, you've done almost everything. Nodding, Arabus narrowed his eyes slightly, seemingly lost in thought. Moanda stood quietly beside him, waiting. After a while, the trembling coming from the ground seemed to gradually subside, and Arabus appeared to have finally made up his mind. Originally, I alone should have endured this blow, the reason for enduring it is unimportant. But now it seems. Turning around, the Lord of Darkness looked at the nymph reincarnated as a deity and said indifferently. Moanda, isn't it? I have a task for you. Please command me. Bowing slightly, the elf obediently responded. In a moment, I will take you to the surface to meet the Divine King, the one you wanted to see before. I will make a covenant with him, and you will be the guarantee of our agreement. You will become a part of his divine court, even a part of his power, and then from that moment on, enjoy the light and beauty on the surface. That's quite nice, isn't it? Then what? What do I need to do? Raising her head cautiously, not feeling happy, Moanda felt somewhat terrified. She did not know what she was being sent to do, but she believed it was definitely not something simple, and what she had to do was certainly more than just enjoying life. You don't need to do anything, at least not for now. And you needn't worry about your safety, because the golden apple tree will remain here. Sighing, Arabus felt a touch of remorse for the first time. He looked up at the sky of the underground space, as if looking at something else. It's just like Gaia. Quote. What? Not quite catching it, Moanda couldn't help but ask. I mean, there are always things that manage to be disliked by everyone, even by those whom it seeks to protect. With a smile, no further explanation was given, Arabus simply gestured with his hand. Come, let's go. You, who might be considered lucky or not, prepare to welcome the new life that belongs to you. C. 400. Chapter 106. The whole world is an enemy. In the depths of the starry sky, with two ancient gods departing one after another, this desolate place once again returned to its usual silence. Just like the world's edge where the circumterrestrial river flowed, the outer regions of the stars, far from the land, were usually uninhabited. Yet, just as the edge of the sea belonged to the god of the ocean, so did the edge of the stars. Therefore, when a part of their domain was violently torn and reformed, it ultimately drew the attention of the lord of this place. After a long while, at a corner of the sea of stars, a subtle ripple spread out. Two figures emerged in succession. One was a tall, muscular middle-aged man who walked in front, surveying the star domain that had returned to its original state. Following him closely was a woman dressed in elaborate clothes, her body adorned with all kinds of rare treasures, yet a hint of melancholy could be seen between her brows. Under the gaze of the two Titan deities, everything here was very clear. The surface of the starry sky had been repaired, but some deep-seated power was still spreading on another level. The deities who arrived late slowly approached the battlefield, feeling the terrifying remnants of power that lingered. A certain force seemed to have permanently changed the laws here, and from then on, this would become a silent star domain. Any beings below the level of true gods could neither make nor listen to any sound here. At the same time, some form of life seemed to be gestating. In those restored celestial bodies, intermittent thoughts were gradually born. They possessed wisdom due to the power of spirituality, yet were influenced by the power of darkness. Perhaps this would give birth to a unique kind of star domain nymph, or to some strange creature wandering the sea of stars. However, it was clear that the two ancient gods who created all this did not take them into account. Just like the divine-blooded beasts born after numerous godly wars, they had never been noticed by the source of their own bloodlines. Great divine power. Compared to the Lord of Darkness, my mastery of darkness is but the tip of an iceberg, merely an extension. Lightless celestial bodies are just one form of darkness, far from its essence, he murmured. Sighing in admiration at the might of the primordial gods, the Titan deity turned to look at his wife. Over the years, she never stopped urging him to leave the starry sky, yet his response was always another rejection. You see now, Phoebe, this is the true power of the ancient gods, and it is why I am reluctant to go out. I know you have always disliked staying in the silent starry sky, but only here can we avoid the disturbances and dangers of the world, he said, his voice deep and sonorous like the heavy rumble of stars in motion. As the principal god of the lightless celestial bodies, Koios, being one of the few deities to reach divine power level 20, had not revealed himself in the world since the middle of the Second Era. Or it could be said that apart from once briefly taking a stand on the side of the second-generation divine king due to his daughter, the starry goddess Asteria's marriage, and meddling in the starry disputes, this powerful Titan deity had hardly ever been active in the world. Even that brief involvement had come to an abrupt end with the birth of Hecate. Just like his godhood, Koios remained silent in the darkness. He watched the various changes in the world without ever taking action. However, that's what he thought. As the goddess of luminous, Phoebe clearly did not agree. Koios, I acknowledge the power of the Great One, but isn't that exactly why I want you to do something? She said. Greatness is not only inherent. The Father God was not born great, he begot us and then ascended to the throne. He gained his power through his actions, not by idly waiting for power to descend from the heavens. And Cronus, Laine, they all unknowingly took that step, even the current King Zeus is the same. If they can do it, why can't you? Her tone, which had started out fairly calm, became increasingly insistent as she spoke. She was the principal god of the luminous bodies, not some mother of silence, or cold cosmos goddess. She did not at all like her current life. In later myths, Phoebe even briefly held the title of ancient moon goddess, and compared to her reticent husband, she was obviously not a quiet presence. Perhaps in her original fate, she had at some point been in deep conflict with the moon goddess Selene. The goddess of light attempted to bring the moon under her jurisdiction, thereby increasing her authority, but in the end, it only resulted in Zeus gaining another lover. Of course, in this life, the moon lacked that kind of power, so Phoebe no longer directed her sights toward it. By comparison, the true supremacy of the myriad luminous bodies was more enticing to her. Nevertheless, no matter what, that was something Phoebe couldn't achieve on her own. Compared to Koios, her power was far less. You know what I want. Wouldn't it be nice for us to rule the sea of stars together? Hyperion, the true sovereign of the sun, is no more. I've said before, perhaps you should do something. Take control of the sea of stars, or like the Olympian gods, delve into the mysteries of faith. Wouldn't that be wonderful? She said. 3 divine kings, one ancient god born in the same era as the primordial gods, doesn't prove anything. That is their unique nature, the favor of destiny.